Lena was halfway through folding laundry when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Not rushed, not timid. Just precise. She paused, eyes narrowing. No one ever used the front door in her quiet cul-de-sac, especially not on a Saturday afternoon. She approached the peephole, already wary, and her stomach knotted. 2 men stood on the porch in navy blue uniforms, each with a metallic-looking badge clipped to their chest and HOA enforcement unit stitched onto their sleeves. One held a clipboard. The other, a black duffel bag. Parked neatly at the curb was a white SUV with flashing amber lights and a magnetic neighborhood patrol sign on the door. They looked official, maybe too official. The taller one smiled when he noticed her peering out. He stepped forward, lifted his badge toward the peephole, and spoke clearly. "Miss Reeves, we're from the HOA Security Division. We're doing a round of compliance checks. We need to inspect your side gate and backyard entry. Just a quick visual." Lena frowned. She did have an HOA, but she'd never heard of them having a security division. Normally, they just sent passive-aggressive emails about trash bins and lawn height. "I wasn't informed of any inspection," she called through the door. "It's a surprise check," the second man answered smoothly, without missing a beat. "We've had some property line violations in the area. Standard protocol." His tone was casual, even bored. But something about it scratched at the back of her mind. She looked down. Both men wore gloves. Black tactical gloves. In May. That was weird. "Can I see some ID?" she asked, still not opening the door. Clipboard guy held up a laminated badge again, but it was too far to read the text. The photo looked real enough. "We're happy to verify, Mom, but you need to open the door. We're on a tight schedule." The phrasing was wrong. Too much pressure. Her thumb hovered over the phone screen. Her brother Jake had just texted her a meme 5 minutes ago. Maybe she'd call him, just to feel safer. "I'll have my brother join us on video while you do the inspection," she said, slowly unlocking her phone. The 2 men exchanged the briefest glance. The shorter one took a step forward and dropped his voice. "Miss Reeves, we can either do this the easy way, or we have to file a report for noncompliance. That means citations, fines, possibly even a lion." Lena's skin crawled. No HOA guy ever talked like that. She backed up, heart thudding. "Actually, I'm going to call the HOA president directly," she said, trying to sound steady. That's when everything changed. The tall man lunged, slamming his shoulder into the door. It crashed open, smashing her backward into the floor. Her phone flew from her hand, skidding under the coffee table. The men rushed in, shadows swallowing the room. And Lena realized this wasn't about the HOA. This was an ambush. Lena hit the floor hard, her elbow slamming into the hardwood as the door burst open. Her breath vanished in a gasp. Before she could scramble to her feet, gloved hands seized her wrists and yanked her up. "Don't fight," one of the men hissed, dragging her across the entryway. "It'll be worse if you fight." She kicked wildly, catching a shin. The man grunted but didn't let go. The other grabbed a zip tie from his duffel and looped it tight around her wrists. The plastic sliced into her skin. She screamed, raw and loud, but the taller man shoved a towel into her mouth and wrapped duct tape around her head. The world shrank into muffled sounds and adrenaline. Her heart pounded. They weren't thieves. They weren't here for money. They had come with purpose and preparation. One of them checked his watch. 3 minutes. Get her out the back. 3 minutes for what? Lena's mind raced, terror churning her thoughts into static. She twisted her head, trying to scream through the gag, but her voice barely carried past the thick fabric. The man with the clipboard, now discarded, rummaged through her drawers. Not searching. Stalling. He pulled out her mail, glanced at the name, and smirked. This the right one. Lena Reeves. They said she had a brother in the military. We're on a clock. They knew about Jake. Her blood ran cold. That wasn't random knowledge. That was personal, specific, targeted. They lifted her roughly by the arms and started dragging her toward the back door. Her bare feet scraped the floor. Her keys still sat on the kitchen counter. Her phone was under the table, blinking with an unanswered text from Jake. "Call him," she screamed in her mind. "Jake, call back." Just as they reached the sliding door, one of the men's phones buzzed. He pulled it out, read something, then looked sharply at his partner. "Change of plan. Use the alley. The front's not safe anymore." "Why?" the other growled. "Her brother's ex-Marine. You want to deal with that." They moved faster now. The shorter man yanked open the back door. A gust of wind whipped into the kitchen as Lena caught a glimpse. There, just beyond the wooden fence, was a white panel van. No plates, no markings. One door hung open, the interior blacked out with heavy curtains. A van. A secluded alley. Zip ties. No witnesses. Lena thrashed harder. One of them smacked her across the face, not with rage, but with trained precision, like he'd done it before. "You're making this worse for yourself," he said calmly. She didn't care. Her mouth burned from the gag. Her wrists were bleeding. Every second counted. And somewhere out there, Jake had to know something was wrong. But how fast could he get here? And would he be fast enough? The van door yawned open, like a mouth ready to swallow her whole. Inside, it was dark, lined with black insulation, no windows, no light. Just a mattress on the floor and something far more chilling. A steel anchor bolt embedded into the wall with a chain dangling from it. Lena's pulse thudded in her ears. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't intimidation. This was a full-on abduction. The shorter man hopped into the back first, yanked her up by her tied wrists, and dragged her inside. Her knees scraped the metal bumper. She kicked wildly, landing a desperate blow to his side, but it only made him grunt and grab her harder. The van door slammed shut, sealing her in blackness. She couldn't see, but she could feel. The engine rumbled beneath her. The vehicle shifted into gear, then movement. Forward. Somewhere outside, the bright suburban sun shone. People walked dogs, mowed lawns, had no idea a woman was being kidnapped just feet away. The men whispered to each other in the front seat. She couldn't catch much, but a few words pierced the fog in her brain. "No cameras in the alley. Transfer her at the overpass. He doesn't want a mark on her." There was someone else behind this. Someone giving orders. Her mind reeled. Who? She had no enemies, no debts, no dangerous relationships. And yet, they knew her name. They knew about Jake. They had planned every second, which meant she was being hunted. The van took a sharp turn. Her body slid, slamming into the interior wall. Pain shot through her shoulder. She groaned, the sound barely escaping the gag. She wriggled her wrists, ignoring the slicing pain. The zip ties cut deeper. Blood. But the more she bled, the more the plastic slipped. She had to keep trying. There wasn't going to be a second chance. Then, thump. The van jerked to a stop. Footsteps crunched outside. The rear doors creaked open. A third man stood there. Not in uniform. No disguise. He wore jeans, boots, and a button-down shirt rolled to the elbows. And unlike the others, he looked her in the eyes. Calm, cold, familiar. Lena's breath caught. She'd seen that face before. Once. A boardroom meeting. Her old job. He had argued with her ex-boss, the contractor she'd helped expose for fraud last year. A man who swore she'd regret it. "You're prettier than I remember," the man said softly. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. Lena shrank away, panic rising in her throat. "But don't worry," he added with a small smile, pulling a phone from his pocket. "You're not the one we want to hurt." He tapped the screen and brought it to his ear. "Get the brother on the line. He needs to hear her scream." Jake Reeves was elbow-deep in grease, tuning up an old motorcycle in his garage when the first red flag hit. His phone buzzed. FaceTime from Lena. She never used video unless it was something funny. He wiped his hands and answered casually. Yo, sis. What? The screen lit up with her face, but something was wrong. Her smile was forced, frozen. She didn't speak. Her eyes flicked, not at him, but behind the phone. Just a blink. A shift. Then the screen went black. Jake stared at the disconnected call for 2 full seconds before his spine stiffened. Something's wrong. He called back. No answer. Texted. Nothing. His military brain, hardwired to spot threats and patterns, kicked in. He opened the FaceTime history, replayed the few frozen frames still catched on his phone. Her eyes had looked past the camera. Her pupils had dilated. Her smile was fake. And worse, behind her, there had been a faint shape, a shadow, a shoulder. Jake dropped the phone, yanked his keys off the wall, and sprinted to his truck. He grabbed his crowbar from the rack behind the seat, not his favorite tool, but effective, and roared out of the driveway, tires screeching. As he drove, he hit speed dial. 911. What's your emergency? My sister may have been taken from her house. She FaceTimed me seconds before it went dark. I'm a former Marine. I'm en route. Address is 4576 Willow Glen. Send backup. Now. Sir, wait for officers. Do not. He hung up. Jake wasn't waiting. His truck tore through red lights, his jaw clenched like a vice. 1,000 possibilities blitzed through his mind. But they all pointed one way. Someone wanted Lena silenced. He remembered the trial last year. Lena had testified against a corrupt contractor she used to work for. The guy lost his license, his business, and his mind, probably. He'd threatened her in court. This isn't over, he'd hissed as security dragged him out. Jake had filed it away, but now it came roaring back. He made the final turn onto Lena's street, and his stomach dropped. Her front door was open. The welcome mat was flipped. A lamp lay shattered inside the entrance. No sign of her car. No sign of her. He jumped out of the truck, crowbar in hand, calling her name. Lena. No answer. Then he saw it. A single zip tie, blood-smeared, discarded near the back door, and tire marks in the alley behind the fence. Heavy tread. Fresh. He knelt, touched the stain, then stood up, eyes blazing. They're moving her, he muttered. The predator instinct, dormant since his last tour, surged alive inside him. Whoever took her didn't just make a mistake. They made an enemy. Jake climbed back into the truck, checked the tire marks again, then took off down the alley, following the trail like a hunter. Somewhere ahead, his sister was in a van, surrounded by wolves. And Jake was coming with teeth. The van sped down narrow suburban streets, tires biting into the pavement with a terrifying speed. Inside, Lena's stomach twisted with every bump. She couldn't see out the blacked-out windows, but she could feel the vehicle weaving through the grid of streets, taking unpredictable turns. A strange hum filled the air, the sound of distant machinery, or maybe just her heart pounding against her ribs. They knew about Jake. Her brother had served as a Marine, a man forged in the hardest of battles. If he was coming for her, things were about to get very, very bad for the men holding her captive. Lena shifted her weight against the van's cold metal walls. The zip tie cut deeper into her wrists with every movement, but the pain was nothing compared to the sinking weight in her chest. What if he's too late? The man in the front seat, her old boss's lackey, the one with the cold smile, turned to look at her in the rearview mirror. Don't worry. You're not the one we're concerned about. We just need a little leverage. Leverage. Lena barely had time to process his words before her attention snapped back to the sound of a screeching engine in the distance. She could barely hear it over the growl of the van's motor, but it was getting louder. Closer. No way. Her mind refused to believe it at first, but the noise grew until it was unmistakable. A truck. A heavy truck. and the sound was coming straight at them. Lena's pulse shot up, and she instinctively tugged at the zip tie again. The pressure in her chest grew tighter, suffocating. Was it Jake? Was he really coming? The van took another turn, and Lena's gut clenched. He's close. He's got to be close. Outside, Jake's truck thundered through the alley, tires kicking up dirt as he followed the faint trail of rubber marks. His grip on the wheel was ironclad, his eyes scanning every corner, every movement, waiting for something, anything, that would give him the lead. Then, just ahead, the van turned down a narrow street, disappearing from sight. Jake slammed on the brakes. Gotcha. He shifted into reverse and spun the wheel, gunning the engine again. He wasn't about to let them slip away. He could almost feel his sister's presence, her fear, like an electric charge in the air. His hands tightened on the wheel. He was so close. Jake didn't know what they were planning, but he knew one thing for sure. If they thought they were going to take Lena without a fight, they were about to learn what it meant to mess with the wrong family. He revved the engine and shot forward, cutting across a few yards of grass. Ahead, the van was slowing down. They had arrived at an industrial area, a ghost town with only the distant hum of machinery to fill the silence. He could feel it. He could feel them. They didn't know they had a storm coming. Lena, meanwhile, was still being shoved and pulled around in the back of the van. Every part of her screamed at her to do something, but her hands were bound, her mouth silenced. They weren't just planning to hurt her. They had a plan for this, and Jake was walking right into it. The van slowed down and came to a stop in front of a dilapidated warehouse. The lackey at the wheel turned to Lena and gave her a sickening smile. "This is where the fun begins," he murmured, just before he killed the engine. The doors of the van creaked open, and somewhere, deep inside her gut, Lena knew this was the moment. The van doors swung open with a gut-wrenching squeal. Lena's heart pounded as the harsh sunlight cut through the dim interior of the van, blinding her for a moment. The moment she had dreaded had arrived. She was no longer just a captive. She was a pawn in someone's game. The lackey jerked her forward by the zip tie, dragging her out of the van and onto the cracked pavement. Her legs felt like lead, but she refused to stumble. "Stay focused," she told herself. "Jake is close. He's coming. Stay calm." "Let's get her inside," the man with the cold smile ordered, the one who had known her from her past. He had a certain control about him, an unnerving calm in the face of something as chaotic as this. Lena tried to take in her surroundings. The area was industrial, old warehouses, rusted fencing, and scattered debris. The smell of oil and dust filled the air. The place was deserted, isolated, perfect for whatever grim purpose they had in mind. The second man pulled her forward, unceremoniously pushing her toward the warehouse door. Lena could hear faint voices inside, men murmuring in low tones. Her mind raced, trying to piece together their intentions, but nothing made sense. "Leverage," that's what he said. "They need me for something." But for what? As they neared the door, the sound of screeching tires made her head snap toward the street. Her heart skipped a beat. No, it couldn't be. The truck. The sound of the engine she had heard earlier. It was Jake. She wasn't sure how, but she could feel it in the air. He was here. The men froze for a moment, their faces tightening as the truck's engine roared to a stop. Inside. Now. The man with the cold smile hissed, shoving Lena roughly through the door. She stumbled, but regained her footing. Inside, the dim lighting of the warehouse gave everything an eerie, unsettling feel. Rows of rusted machinery loomed in the shadows. A metal staircase led up to a catwalk above them. The faint smell of sweat and tension hung heavy in the air. Lena's instincts screamed. This was the point of no return. They wanted her, and they weren't going to let her go easily. The sound of the truck door slamming cut through the air. Her pulse quickened as the second man scanned the windows of the warehouse, checking the surroundings. "We've got company," he muttered. Without warning, the front door of the warehouse burst open, and Jake stormed inside, crowbar raised high, his expression a mask of fury. "Let her go," he growled, his voice a deadly promise. The man with the cold smile smirked and held up his hands, feigning innocence. Now, no need to get all worked up. We just need a moment. We can." Bang. The sound of a gunshot split the air. The bullet ricocheted off the concrete, narrowly missing Jake. The tension snapped. All hell broke loose. Lena screamed through her gag, her body thrown against the wall as the men scattered. One of them drew a gun, aiming it directly at Jake's chest. Jake's military training kicked in. He dropped, rolling to the side as he dove for cover behind a pile of metal crates. The second man lunged for the door, trying to flee, but Jake's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Not so fast." Jake shot forward, closing the distance in seconds, and tackled the man to the ground with a force that rattled the warehouse. Lena's heart raced as the struggle unfolded before her. She was still tied up, helpless, but not hopeless. Jake was here, and that was everything. In the chaos, she saw the man with the gun aim at Jake again, fingers tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, Lena's eyes locked onto the crowbar Jake had dropped earlier. It was within arm's reach. In one swift motion, she twisted her body and kicked the crowbar into her lap. With shaking hands, she gripped it, using every ounce of her remaining strength to break through the zip ties. They snapped, and she was free. But the gunshot rang out again. Click. The world slowed to a crawl. Lena's heart was in her throat as the gunshot reverberated through the cold steel of the warehouse. Her eyes locked onto the gunman, his finger on the trigger, his gaze focused entirely on Jake. The air was thick with tension. Every breath she took felt like it could be her last. "No," her mind screamed. "I won't let him die." With adrenaline surging through her, Lena swung the crowbar with every ounce of power she could muster. The sharp metallic clang of it hitting the floor was drowned out by the thunder of the gunshot that echoed through the vast space. Click. Jake's head jerked to the side. His body was moving before he even registered the sound. He hit the ground just as the gun fired again. But it wasn't aimed at him. The shot missed its mark, ricocheting off a steel beam, sending sparks flying. Jake rolled, taking advantage of the split-second opening, and tackled the gunman to the ground, knocking the weapon out of his hands. But in the chaos, Lena's eyes weren't on Jake anymore. They were on the man with the cold smile, the one who had orchestrated this whole nightmare, the one who had threatened her, manipulated her, and pulled the strings from the shadows. He was backing away, eyes darting to the door. A sinking feeling washed over Lena. He was running. "No," she screamed through her gag, her voice raw and desperate. "Jake, behind you." But it was too late. The cold, smiling man had already bolted for the catwalk above. His footsteps echoed as he sprinted toward the exit, his intentions clear. Jake turned just as the man reached the stairs. Without missing a beat, he pushed off from the ground, ignoring the pain in his ribs, and charged toward the catwalk. But the man was fast, too fast. He reached the ladder, climbing up with a speed that didn't make sense for a man his age. Lena's mind raced. She couldn't let him escape. Not after everything. Her eyes scanned the room, her body still buzzing with fear and adrenaline. The crowbar, it was still in her hands. Without thinking, she hurled it toward the man on the catwalk, the weapon spinning through the air with deadly precision. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough. The crowbar slammed into the man's shoulder, throwing him off balance. He let out a strangled gasp, his hands grasping at the air as he teetered on the edge of the catwalk. For a brief moment, everything seemed to slow down. He was going to fall. He had to. And then, with a sickening crash, he hit the floor, the impact rattling the walls. Lena's breath caught in her throat. For a heartbeat, she thought he was done. But as he stirred, Groaning in pain, a new realization settled over her. The man wasn't dead. He wasn't just some random criminal. He had a bigger role in all of this. He was connected to something bigger. Jake stood over him, panting, his eyes full of fury. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. But the man only laughed, low and rasping. "You think you've won? You've only uncovered the first piece of the puzzle, Marine. There's more, so much more." Before Jake could react, the man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device. With a smug grin, he pressed a button. Boom! A distant explosion rattled the building, sending dust and debris falling from the ceiling. A muffled cry of panic came from outside. The man looked up at Jake, blood dripping from his lip. The game's just begun. The blast echoed through the warehouse like a shockwave, rattling the very foundations of the building. Lena's body jolted, thrown back by the force of the explosion. Her heart raced, and the air seemed to vibrate with a new kind of terror. The man on the floor, bloodied and broken, let out a ragged laugh. "You should have stayed out of this," he wheezed, his hand still clutching the black device. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Jake's eyes narrowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't need to ask who was behind this. It was bigger. Much bigger than just Lena, just some corrupt businessman or personal vendetta. This was orchestrated by a shadowy network, far more dangerous and far-reaching than anything he'd encountered before. The explosion had sounded distant, but the tremor of the building told him it wasn't just one blast. It was a diversion. "Where is she?" Jake growled, his grip tightening around the collar of the man who'd masterminded it all. "Who are you working for? What's the plan?" The man chuckled, spitting blood onto the floor. "You think you're in control. You think you've won. You've just exposed one piece of the puzzle, but it's far from over." Lena, still recovering from the shock, managed to break free from the chains that had bound her. Her body ached, but the fire in her chest kept her focused. She stumbled over to Jake, her eyes filled with urgency. "Jake, it's a trap. The explosion. It's not just a distraction. There's more. There are others." Her voice cracked with fear as the realization hit them both like a cold wave. The explosion wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the beginning of something far more terrifying. Jake looked at her, his face hardening. "I know. That's why we're getting out of here. Now." The man, who was still gasping for breath on the floor, let out a final, rasping laugh. "You won't make it far. The real game is just beginning. You think the explosions were an accident. They're happening all over the city, right now. Chaos is already spreading. And soon, everyone will know who's really in charge." Lena's stomach churned. Who? Who is behind this? The man's grin faltered as he stared up at them. "You'll find out soon enough. But by then, you'll be too late." Jake didn't wait for him to say another word. With a brutal yank, he hauled the man to his feet, slamming him against the wall. "What's the real plan? Who else is involved?" But before the man could respond, another explosion rocked the building, this one much closer. The walls shuddered, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The entire warehouse began to groan under the pressure. Lena's eyes went wide with realization. The detonations weren't just a distraction. They were a signal for something else to unfold. "No," she breathed, "they're destroying everything. This isn't just about us. It's about something much bigger." And then the man's face twisted into a final, malevolent grin. "The world you know, it's about to burn. And you're not going to stop it." Suddenly, the lights flickered in and went out. The warehouse plunged into darkness, the sound of machinery whirring and the distant shrieks of chaos outside sending cold chills down Lena's spine. The last thing she heard before the world erupted into madness was the man's final words. "Welcome to the endgame." The truth had been laid bare. Lena and Jake weren't just fighting for survival. They were standing on the precipice of a new world order, a shadowy conspiracy that had been lurking in the dark corners of society. The explosions, the manipulation, the betrayal, it was all part of something far more sinister. And now, with the city falling apart around them, the real fight for their lives was just beginning.